Hello and welcome to another session of AWAAZ being conducted by EPS, Economics, Politics and Social Science Interest Group of IIM Kozhikode. Today we have with us Dr. Kausik Gangopadhyay, Professor of Economics at IIM Kozhikode. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
So we'll now ask you a series of questions regarding the economic situation in light of the recent COVID outbreak and what are the possible repercussions of that, how the government should tackle and on those lines. So starting off, we have seen that given the current projections, it's obvious that we're heading towards an economic recession. Now, besides the stimulus package, what kind of policies should the government take to combat this?
So as far as the economic situation is concerned, there are two ways we can envisage it. One is the general downturn of the economy, as you are rightly saying, and recess. Because of course the demand has grown low. I'm happy as a head of the household, the expenditures are running low for these days. But I am happy as individually. But as an economy, we are really, it's not a good thing that demand is kind of low. We all know that when the collective demand is low, there is less demand of in the economy, then of course there will be less requirement of the labor supply. So the employment is bound to fall, and we know those things. And as far as the current estimates, they are saying that India could have grown 5 to 6% in the current year, but it can be as low as 2.5% or maybe even low. So that is one aspect.
So the question is, the government has announced a stimulus package to fight this. So besides that, what other policies should they take to combat the situation?
Yes, but I'm trying to say that this is one aspect, but there is another aspect. So I would like to say that, shall I describe the situation first? Then I can talk about the government policy, or you want other way? How to combat the general situation as well as the particular one.
Okay. So you can do it your way.
If you are thinking about the general situation, of course, stimulus package is the Keynesian way of doing things. That has to be done. But we need to remember one thing. When a crisis of this magnitude comes, then there is also opportunity to do things. So, of course, other than stimulus package through which government can boost demand, we may not be able to think to, we do not have too much of economic restrictions at hand. The other idea is simply do nothing. That's what the neoclassical schools will say, do nothing. And the Keynesian people will say, give this stimulus to boost demand, right? Even Donald Trump, American president, he has actually sanctioned a lot of money for people who are engaged in the particular sector. But I would go one step ahead. We are going to find a recession, no problem. We had recessions before. India economy, good thing about it is 90% is fueled by internal demand. We are not based on export or anything like that, right? So it is going to bounce back quite pretty soon. But second aspect is, when we get over the crisis, what are we going to do? So one very particular thing that we should do now, and opportunities are always there, and it is particularly aggravating now, was the banking. The bank crisis India had, right? We have so many NPS and other things. What is the reason? The reason is, in India, the laws are so colonial that you cannot really start up a business. If you're ordinary person, village person, you might be of good intelligence, but you can't do anything, because we will face an atmosphere that is not made in India. You have the laws of colonial era laws, of doing company laws, registration laws. So it's a lot of hassles up there. And bureaucracy is very difficult to beat. They will give one reason or other excuse. But now the thing is, the crisis is there. It's a very deep crisis. We have faced such a big recession in India maybe last 50 years or so. Now you can actually can bounce back at the bureaucracy and say, get rid of all the laws, make the company laws, registration laws as much as flexible as possible, so that we can kickstart something. And in inspiration to kickstart the economy, you can actually get away with these bureaucratic hassles to entrepreneurs.
Okay. So what you are suggesting is the government should take the initiative now to bring in these reform measures of the archaic system.
To make it to make our economy more of an entrepreneurship based economy,
Okay.
rather than more of a more planned and channel and network based economy.
Right. So another thing that many people have suggested is that this is the correct time to roll out something like a UBI. So this is a two-part question. The first thing is like, does the government have the money to do it? And the second is that if they have, is this the correct time to roll out UBI?
So if you are looking at an UBI, I mean, one political party in the view of the economy said, and UBI in that in the measure of like 6,000 per person, right? 6,000 rupees per person.
Right.
And but that was not UBI. That was like for targeted towards 1/5 of the.
Yeah, exactly.
If you are thinking of that much money, we don't have the resources. So even for that much money that they said, even for 1/5 of the population, you would have to stop basically all the other welfare schemes.
Right.
If you are trying to do it seriously, and that is still only 1/5 of the population. So if you want to get the entire people, you don't have don't have that much tax, you don't have that much revenue. So it's not possible, I would say.
But the argument that these proponents have is that, like you said, if we stop the other policies of the government directed towards the welfare of the people, and then just roll out a UBI, and so being a UBI, it will be inclusive, so people won't be burdened by the fact that they have to be poor to receive it. So people all will benefit. So in that case, is this feasible? Does the government have the money?
I mean, if you see, everything has the money. If you can stop some of the other things like infrastructure, if you stop it totally, if you stop it, arm purchase, purchase of the weapons and other materials. It's feasible. Everything is feasible. But the point is that the right way to go.
Yeah, exactly. But then obviously those are issues of national importance, and obviously there will be budget allocated for those. The question is like, if we stop all the other welfare schemes and then just use that money as a UBI, is that feasible?
I have not done the calculations of my hand, but I would say that it will be very, very difficult proposition. So just remember one thing: it means that government cannot build any new road. Government cannot give subsidy to airlines, right? Like Indian Airlines. The ticket prices will skyrocket. So it is possible that people will get 6,000 more, but because of the increasing price level because of misallocation, they will actually be poor. It's very much possible.
Okay. So moving on, another thing that many people have suggested is that, is a tax break feasible in this situation for companies to pay salaries to their existing employees and hire workers after the situation becomes normal? Do you think a tax break is feasible?
So we have already in some sense given a tax rate. Corporate income tax in India is kind of one of the lowest in the world, right? I think apart from Singapore, nobody enjoys such low income tax. If you want to go even below that, one may go. But my suspicion is that it is not the tax that is actually hampering the problem. See, another aspects of the aggregate problem is not really the recession. It is more of uncertainty. Nobody knows what will happen after this crisis is over. So, like when you look at this international economics and this managing of our currencies, they always says whether you appreciate currency, depreciate currency, keep it stable, everything is okay, as long as you don't make it too volatile, you don't make it too much too uncertain. So this uncertainty is more of a killer rather than any other specific policy. So and in COVID outbreak, that is exactly the problem. Now, if we give a tax break, that will not really create a system of certainty, right? I mean,
so the extreme argument for this is that you waive off taxes for this financial year. So because the companies are not in operation, many companies are not in operation now, so they can use the tax money to pay off their employees and hire more people after the situation becomes normal. So is that feasible?
So the problem is, if you look at, of course, it's feasible, but there are many multiple aspects to that. Number one is we already committed to a particular budget deficit, and you already have surplus this year. That budget from the targeted figure, right? Because of structural change argument or something, we kind of. But if you do it too many times, as a brand, India will fade, right? I think this is the right time for India to come up to the world and say, look at us, we run a transparent system. I mean, the news is not hidden here, nobody is censoring anything, and we are doing things very openly.
Right.
But still, we are doing good, we are doing efficient. So, all the appeal of the world for towards China and Chinese, China is a center of manufacturing, is because China is a kind of a very stable country. And that is the only argument. But now people are seeing the other side of non-openness. How one endemic or whatever pandemic out of it and destroy the world. I mean, people are very skeptical about the Chinese way of handling things, how much they are revealing and all these issues. Now, I think for India now it is an opportunity to project itself as an alternative to the world and sell brand India. Now we cannot really go to a few companies some tax breaks, and that is not, I think, worth doing. Of course, there are learned minds up there, but the idea is this formal economy. It is only about 10%. So if you look at me, I'll be happy if companies get tax break because then our students will get perhaps will get good offers. Maybe some of them have delayed, deferred employment. That will not happen. But that is not the that is not the big concern. Big concern is brand India has to be kind of taken ahead in this kind of case, which cannot actually happen with this kind of.
Okay, so sir, like you rightly mentioned, the economy is taking a downturn. The corporates are not operating at their full capacity. Now, India in itself was already plagued with the non-performing assets problem. The banks already had them, a lot of them in their books. The recent case of Yes Bank. So, with this COVID crisis, how big a problem will the non-performing assets become?
So I would say that non-performing asset is not a particular concern now because whatever was non-performing has been exposed. But now the only problem is banks, they have money, but they really don't know how to give loans because before the loans used to be given based on phone calls and other things. To replace that kind of attitude, I mean, some people would say crony capitalism, you need to have a healthy functioning way of human mind, right? And what is stopping it? That one thing that is stopping it is that if you roam in the normal Indian street, Indian household, we are used to a particular kind of cultural nuances. And when you go to a court of law in a registration office, have you been there? Then you would see that it is not exactly the same kind of nuances. It's a very different world. It's a very abstract world which we don't understand at all. Even if you read a legal document, it is even in your own language, the language where we speak, you will not be able to make out anything, heads or tails about it. And that is actually in some sense scaring people, right? We don't want to grow, we don't want to be too formal because then you have to run into, and we don't know what kind of mistake will I make because I don't understand anything there, right?
Yes.
That environment has to be killed. If you want to revive India economy, it has to be through entrepreneurship of the common people. And it is not also a very, I would say, out of cultural sync aspiration. It is not. India is forever known for its commercial structure, for commercial enterprises, forever. And we have, our people are used to make handicrafts. That to go to be exported to Rome, Baghdad, and so many places, right? So nothing really I'm not saying that we have to grow and make a revolution. All I am saying that you have to be really act as a decolonized country, and we have to have our own system where people can reach to their aspiration.
Yes. Okay. So, sir, the next question is really most of us are concerned about the impact that this COVID-19 crisis is having on the employment market. So, like, is there any parallel that can be drawn from the past recessions? Because the recessions that were due to financial meltdowns and other kind of crisis. But this is something on a whole new scale. So, like, what would be the impact on the employment market as such?
If you look at the parallels in the after India became independent, really there were no parallels. I mean, the subprime crisis would be, I think, lesser than what this crisis will bring about. But if you want to see the subprime crisis, it had a huge impact all over the world.
Right.
For the developed world, the GDP actually contracted for 1 year or so.
Right.
Yes.
But in India, nothing like that happened.
Yes.
Right? We actually did quite well because our banks were really unaffected.
Right.
So I'm rather optimistic about it because compared to Europe and America, where the death tolls are in the thousands, and I mean, they used to be taught in the textbooks that this epidemic and pandemic are kind of third world things, right? I mean, let's go to save the world, right? That was the spirit, because it will not happen. Nothing will happen to us. It will to them, and we can save them. But it is the other way around. It is actually these countries that need to be saved, like India, like Thailand. I mean, so third world countries. They have actually dealt this epidemic quite well. Really quite well.
Right.
And it is the developed countries which actually suffered much more.
Right.
So in some sense of the term, I think it will have a lasting impact. If I have to make a parallel to that, I will go back like a century back, and there used to be literatures where everybody used to think that Europeans are genetically superior to Europeans. That was the accepted understanding in the 19th century. Then 1905, there was a battle between Japan and Russia about some islands called Sakhalin Islands.
Yes.
And in that battle, actually, nobody
Russia lost.
bet on Japan, but Russia actually lost.
Right.
And after that, actually, this perception of Europeans are superior inherently kind of got a severe blow. So I think this is after this COVID crisis, that myth of European and Western sovereignty and Western way as the supreme, I think this will take a beating. So from that perspective, India has really a good chance, I would say. It's possible that this crisis, if we utilize it well, it can be our GDP may not grow this year very large, but if we do good steps, next 5 years, we can actually grow better than all the countries in the world. Right. That is kind of the optimism I would kind of try to say.
Right. So, sir, you mentioned like the steps. So, what kind of steps, like apart from the doing away with the archaic laws and the colonial system that was already prevalent in India? So, any other changes that would be required?
I think there is more, something like that. You see, there are many kind of India, the control of the government in running the country. I'll kind of disagree with some of the rather prevalent narratives. This government is very powerful. I would say in India, government is quite powerless in some sense. So I'll give you one example. In Tamil Nadu, there is a copper production plant, right? Sterlite.
Yes.
Right.
And that was the biggest plant in India, of course, and probably one of the very dominant one, maybe biggest one, biggest one in the area. But what happened? We closed it down.
Right.
And we closed it down. Really, it's not that they are really violating big way or anything like that. So because of some environment activism or something, atmosphere was created. It looked this is the biggest problem to it. And as a matter of fact, what we were the exporter of copper, and after closing of the plant, we becoming net importer.
Yes.
Right. So what is the reason? Of course, we need to talk about environment. I mean, I would say that is what I sincerely believe. But actually, if you look at things, India and China are the only places in the world where tree covers are growing in the last 50 years consistently. It is I'm not saying we are doing enough, but it is not that we are doing bad compared to the world. So just shutting down a plant in the name of environmental activism and everything, it is also not impossible that environmental activists, they might be very nice people, angels, but they may be nuanced by other outside world that you go this direction. And some of the times, rather than taking a holistic picture, the way we speak is rather very shallow kind of way, right? I mean, so I would say that, we say we need electricity for all. But if you try to build a thermal power plant, you will say, we can't have so many coal cutting because, coal mining because It will hamper the environment. If you go to the hydropower plant, we say no, we cannot have change the river, not the kind of
Right.
events. And if you have nuclear plant, you say nuclear will destroy everything. But
Right.
Yes.
this actually is expensive. I mean, there has to be some balance, right, between the income and the expenses, between the production
Yes.
and the kind of demand. So that is absent. So I would say, as a India now has a good opportunity to actually look at a very holistic way of looking things, rather than looking at the world as a inspiration. We can
Right.
actually think our calculations directly and
Right.
can get into that. And secondly, rather than moving to globalization, I mean, it seems to everyone that there is too much globalization is there in the world. Did not have so much globalization. I mean, then probably this pandemic had not happened. I mean, if you had so much.
Okay.
And probably we can need to be a little bit of self-sufficient in our way of some basic structure. So this is also another thing I have in mind. Third thing is India is one of the biggest procurer of defense equipment.
Right.
Yes.
Instead of buying from the world, why don't you make everything ourselves? Since we have competent people working on that, we have also Larsen and Toubro, very competent company doing everything, and we have DRDO like organizations that are doing consistent research. Why don't you make a wholehearted attempt kind of to make? So this way,
Yes.
what we are trying to do, I mean, all these things is very much doable now, because
Right.
now we have found a confidence that we are not very less compared to the Western world.
Right. So what you're suggesting is doing this will boost our own employment markets because the employment will be generated domestically.
And also, we will also we have one of the most precious thing for Indian economy, which is our foreign currency, right? Because we have to import the oil no matter what, and we'll save that a lot if we can become independent about self-sufficient.
Okay. So, sir, looking at India, it has a major component in agriculture. Now, with agriculture, like most of the with this lockdown extending, some states are extending it. Odisha has lockdown. Maharashtra has said that they'll lock down till 30th. So, looking at the food scarcity angle, because the harvesting season is around the corner, how will it affect the agricultural market as such? And like, should government take some steps to tackle that?
So they have already, it seems, they have taken a step. That's a good question. Because of course, even though we have like 2-3 months of supply, we should have self-sufficiency in agriculture. I mean, in the anti-globalization kind of world, that is very much required. So one way is we have to buy the produce from the farmers in a right price, because everywhere when this kind of uncertainty happens, what happens, nobody wants to invest, and then the price in the market becomes kind of anti-producer, because nobody wants to buy it, right? I mean, like, we are not investing anything, so that way the farmers, they are in a very danger of not getting proper prices. So if I have something to harvest, I'll do it. But the question is, can I actually get a good price or something out of them? That is number one question. Number two question is, whatever is been bought is kind of kept in the supply chain or in the cold storage and all this kind of thing.
Yes.
Of course, I think India has to go a long way now about agricultural production. We are not good. We are not doing good. I mean, that's an understatement, rather. We have a different parts of the agricultural supply chain. We have to be kind of make it quite better, much better. But one way, I think, as an emergency measure, what we should do, we should actually ensure minimum support price to the producers, to the farmers, so that they get a good price, so the rural demand stays okay. That is one of the very key things. And also, government has reasonable food supply at his hand, so that nobody is kind of scared of, or black marketeers cannot be a big threat to the economy.
Okay.
So, sir,
they are kind of trying to this.
Yeah, so the last question of the day is that Bill Gates had said in a TED talk a few years back, which had gone viral, that the world should prepare for a pandemic and there should be a global fight against that, in the sense that there is sufficient funds and like available technology to prepare for such an outbreak. His logic was that the funds needed to do this is much less than the economic effect a pandemic of a global nature would have. So now, as this has again come back in the reckoning nowadays, because the calculations show that the funds needed to stop this kind of pandemic is in the billions, but the loss to the economy is in the trillions. So what do you think after this? Will the world take note of this, and will there be a global kind of consortium of countries which will do R&D and other kind of measures to combat future pandemics?
I would say even more holistic way. So basically, there is always a stationary thing in the nature. Nature doesn't want to change too very quickly. We wants to come back to the original state, right? Now, what we have done a limitless expansion of human ideas. So if you look at the global population, in the last 50, 60 years, global population has become more than 3 times, right? And economic activities has grown maybe 10 times or 15 times. And these economic activities are not without impact on the world environment, right? So of course the world environment will come back. If you are keen, I mean, so I think I was seeing some documentary. I think they say that the virus outbreak is related to how many mammals you are killing. So if you are killing too many mammals, the virus are unseated from those host mammals, and they will attack. And of course, some of the times they will find a new host in humans. Right?
Okay.
That's how this will happen. So from that perspective, a global epidemic or pandemic, whatever it is, it was long due. There is nothing very surprising about it, I would say, quote unquote. Right. But problem is that I would say in a greater way. I would say one thing we have realized that we need human beings. We don't need always expansion. We also need little bit of stability in our way of doing things. Right. So far we want to grow so much percentage and all this kind of thing. So that worldview is not really conducive for our survival in this planet, right? We are not even talking about big disasters that are kind of the experts say are written to us if we go this like polar cap ice cap melting and other things. But this is only a pandemic that is kind of putting us to this point. So do we want that? So another way I would say to go is why are we measuring this global GDP? We should have a better measure of measuring the global human happiness. Like I would say Bhutan, in spite of being a small country, they are having a confidence to measure it, that human happiness, rather than GDP growth rate, and do things accordingly. So this is, I think, in some sense, the world should head towards. I mean, what happened in Japan, they used to have nuclear power a lot. So after the disaster in 2011, Fukushima, they actually cut down the power. And it was, they cut down the power all over 20-30% all over Japan. That was, they could not think about it. But they have done it well. Russian, whatever it is. So in some sense, probably we don't need so much of global expansion in terms of materials and things. We need to a little bit of more of a happiness to artistic and some enjoyment. That has been kind of lost from our lives.
But the ideas you are suggesting is kind of utopian, and maybe not all countries will agree to that. The idea proposed by Bill Gates is that there can be a consortium like a NATO in the case of military forces. So there can be a consortium of countries who fight pandemics and who prepare for that, like the drills NATO does. Similarly, they can do mock drills in the case of stopping a global outbreak of a pandemic. Is that possible?
I'm not, so I wouldn't want to say it so often, but I mean, because I lived in America, it is a standard American worldview that needs help from America, like little children needs kind of parental support. And when they will be in crisis, they will face in pandemic, American forces will do and deliver them. I don't think that is the way to go ahead. I don't believe in military so much. I believe in we should. I believe in more polycentricism. It is again another idea propounded by another American, Eleanor Ostrom, who said learn how to be more self-sufficient and create community without any written contract, more like more cultural norms. So I think that direction we need to go to. So I will not agree with Bill Gates' idea in some.
So moreover, we already had a consortium, WHO, which was not doing almost anything.
Yeah, do well, number one. Number two is whenever you talk about a central thing, it is always, I mean, obviously the explanation or the reason justification for all centralizations is human welfare. But often these centralizations, I think, create more human miseries than any welfare.
Thank you, sir, for
Thank you,
joining
sir.
us, taking
Thank
your
you.
time and talking to us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.